So picture this. You sit down at your desk, you type a quick prompt into whatever AI tool you use, and, within seconds, you generate this flawless, comprehensive report.
Right, feels like magic.
Exactly. The whole friction of staring at a blank page is just gone. And it feels like the ultimate productivity hack.
Oh, totally.
But beneath that feeling of, effortless efficiency, there is a very real, pressing question. Are you actually becoming a super performer, or are you quietly slipping into a new mental underclass?
Yeah, and the stakes for this go way beyond just, your personal productivity on a Tuesday afternoon.
Right.
It is fundamentally about the future of human capability. I mean, how we actually structure our cognitive labor. The idea that the very tools we design to elevate our work might actually be slowly eroding our cognitive abilities. It's something organizations are only just now starting to grapple with.
And that is exactly the mission of our deep dive today. We're exploring a fascinating paper by Jonathan H. Westover, PhD, titled Cognitive Polarization in the AI Era.
It's a great read.
It really is. It tackles this rather stark prediction made by the cultural commentator David Brooks, who essentially argues that AI is going to aggressively fracture the workforce.
Right, into very distinct groups.
Yeah. So we're going to uncover why this divide isn't actually about your personality or your innate intelligence. It's really about how your workplace is designed. And more importantly, we are going to give you an actionable blueprint to ensure you end up on the winning side of this massive technological shift. Okay, let's unpack this.
Sounds good.
We should probably start with Brooks's framework, just to see how this polarization is already playing out, right?
Yeah. So Brooks divides the workforce into 3 distinct camps when it comes to AI adoption.
Okay.
First, you have the people who outsource their thinking entirely. I mean, they just hand the problem to the AI, grab the output, and move on with their day.
Just zero engagement.
Exactly. Then second, you have those who simply want to optimize friction away. Like, they use it strategically just to get rid of the annoying, repetitive parts of their day.
The busy work. So the third group must be the people who use the technology to push their own boundaries, right?
Yeah.
Like treating it as an intellectual sparring partner rather than just a shortcut.
You hit the nail on the head. They use AI specifically to expand their capabilities. And Brooks links this to a psychological trait called need for cognition, which is basically a metric of whether someone inherently enjoys the effort of deep thinking.
Yeah.
His thesis is that people who hunger for intellectual challenge will use AI to do even more complex thinking. But those who don't will just let the machine do the heavy lifting, and eventually they'll watch their own skills fade.
I mean, that paints a picture of a workforce where it's just survival of the most intellectually curious. Like if you naturally love solving puzzles, you thrive. But if you don't, you inevitably join this mental underclass.
It's a bit grim, right? But Dr. Westover's research actually challenges that deterministic view.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, his paper emphasizes that workplace cognitive engagement is shaped far more heavily by organizational design and what he terms task allocation logic.
Task allocation logic.
Right. It's not just about some innate personality trait. It's about the systemic rules governing how humans and machines actually divide the work within a given company.
Got it. So it's the difference between a company employing, let's say, substitution logic, where AI is implemented specifically to replace human cognitive effort, leading to that inevitable skill atrophy and augmentation logic, where the tool is deliberately integrated to enhance human capacity.
Exactly. The technology is exactly the same, but the deployment strategy dictates the outcome.
Okay, that makes sense.
And if you look at the 2023 Salesforce survey of knowledge workers, it perfectly illustrates how chaotic this deployment currently is.
What did they find?
They found that 78% of knowledge workers are using generative AI for their daily tasks.
Wow, almost everyone.
Right. Yet 26% are getting absolutely zero formal guidance from their organizations on how to actually integrate these tools.
Wait, really? Over a quarter of the workforce is operating in a complete policy vacuum with literally the most powerful cognitive technology we have ever created.
It's wild. And this vacuum is what creates those divergent paths Brooks was talking about. Westover highlights observational research in professional services firms, tracking junior professionals who use AI to generate first drafts of complex analyses.
Oh, yeah, the classic use case.
Totally. But the outcomes for those junior employees depend entirely on what they do next.
Right.
The ones who treat the AI draft as a starting point, like critiquing the logic, injecting context-specific nuance, actively hunting for the edge cases the algorithm missed, they are actively learning from the process.
They're wrestling with it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the employees who treat that draft as a finished product, requiring only some cosmetic formatting before they hit send, they are essentially delegating their entire cognitive load.
They aren't engaging with the problem at all. It's so funny. It maps directly to how we navigate physical spaces.
How so?
Well, it's like using GPS every single time you drive. I mean, at first, the efficiency is intoxicating. Get to your destinations faster, you bypass traffic, and you don't have to devote any mental energy at all to route planning.
Oh, absolutely.
But after a year of this, you suddenly realize you couldn't navigate your own neighborhood without a screen explicitly telling you where to turn. Your internal spatial map completely vanishes because you just haven't been forced to use it.
That is a perfect analogy. And when you scale that GPS analogy up to the level of an entire enterprise, the systemic risks become pretty staggering.
Right, because it's not just one person getting lost.
Exactly. If a company uses substitution logic across the board, the entire organization slowly loses its internal map of its own industry.
And without that internal map, innovation velocity just has to plummet. I mean, breakthroughs rarely come from the C-suite dictating a new direction. They usually emerge from mid-level employees who combine deep, hard-won domain knowledge with fresh perspectives.
Yes, the people actually doing the work.
Right. But if those employees have spent the last 5 years using AI to bypass all that deep thinking, they never built the mental database required to recognize a new pattern or identify a novel market opportunity.
The innovation pipeline just dries up right from the middle. And beyond that, you see a catastrophic drop in an organization's adaptive capacity.
Adaptive capacity.
Yeah. So the paper cites the response to Hurricane Harvey in 2017 as a prime example of this in action. Organizations that maintained a high distributed problem-solving capability across their workforce, they recovered remarkably faster than those operating with rigid, procedure-driven cultures.
That makes sense.
Because AI systems are, by definition, trained on historical data. They excel in predictable environments, but they struggle profoundly with unprecedented situations like, black swan events.
Right, because there's no data for something that's never happened.
Exactly. So if the historical playbook fails and your workforce has literally forgotten how to think flexibly and improvise, the organization is paralyzed.
Man. And the stakes are even higher in environments where lives are actually on the line. Like, automation bias in healthcare perfectly illustrates this.
Oh, it's terrifying.
Clinicians who over-rely on clinical decision support systems, which is essentially medical AI, without actively engaging their own diagnostic reasoning, they actually begin to show higher rates of misdiagnoses.
Yeah, the data on atypical presentations is particularly concerning there. When a patient presents with classic textbook symptoms, the AI is incredibly accurate.
Right, it knows the textbook.
But when symptoms are subtle or contradictory, the algorithm might misinterpret them based on just, statistical probabilities.
Yeah.
If the clinician has deferred to the machine for so long that their own intuition has degraded, they completely miss those crucial edge cases.
They just stop questioning the machine's certainty.
Precisely.
But wait, I have to push back here for a second.
Sure.
Isn't the entire promise of technology since the Industrial Revolution to free us from drudgery? I mean, it seems incredibly counterintuitive that removing cognitive friction and making a job artificially easy would lead to widespread burnout and dissatisfaction. Shouldn't automating the boring stuff make us happier?
You would think so. But what's fascinating here is a psychological mechanism known as the skill paradox.
The skill paradox.
Yeah. When workers first automate their tedious tasks, the immediate reaction is overwhelming relief. I mean, the short-term data shows a huge spike in satisfaction.
Because they're thrilled they don't have to do the boring stuff anymore.
Exactly. But longitudinal data tracking those same workers over time shows a sharp, eventual decline in well-being and job satisfaction, and it's directly correlated with a drop in skill utilization.
So the novelty wears off, and they are just left with a job that asks literally nothing of them.
Yes. Human motivation is deeply grounded in self-determination theory, which posits that we have a fundamental psychological need for competence, autonomy, and growth.
Right.
When work loses its experienced meaningfulness, like when it no longer demands mental effort or offers a real challenge to overcome our intrinsic motivation, just collapses. The paper actually notes this psychological state strongly resembles the crash some individuals experience in early retirement. Like, the theoretical appeal of doing nothing is really strong, but without cognitive stimulation and a sense of developing competence, mental health often deteriorates.
And from a purely economic standpoint, relying on AI to do all your thinking isn't a long-term career hack either. It threatens your career mobility
Oh, big time.
because early and mid-career earnings growth relies heavily on active compounding skill development. Getting this artificial short-term bump in productivity by outsourcing your thinking just leaves you with shallow capabilities.
Right.
When the next technological paradigm shift occurs, you just won't have any foundational analytical skills to fall back on.
The individual and organizational costs of this cognitive atrophy point to a really clear need for structural intervention. I mean, if the psychological toll stems from this loss of experience meaningfulness, the most immediate fix has to happen at the point of interaction.
Like how we actually use the tools.
Exactly. We have to change how we design the physical interface of the technology itself.
So we can't just hand people black box systems that spit out pristine answers.
No, absolutely not.
If the AI doesn't show its work, the user is basically forced into a binary choice, right?
Mhm.
You either blindly accept it or you entirely reject it.
Exactly. Organizations need to transition to what the research calls explanation interfaces. We need the algorithm to operate more like a high school math student who is required to write out the entire equation, not just hand in the final number.
I love that.
And financial services firms provide a great window into how this actually works in practice. Analysts there use AI models for highly complex tasks, like loan underwriting or evaluating investment risk.
Okay.
The more progressive banks are implementing interfaces that explicitly surface the AI's underlying reasoning. So the system highlights which specific financial factors it weighted most heavily, what historical patterns it detected, and the logical steps it took to arrive at a specific recommendation.
So the analyst is essentially forced to trace the machine's logic, which then keeps their own analytical skills actively engaged.
Right. And the performance metrics on this are incredibly revealing. Analysts using these explanation interfaces are initially much slower than their peers who are using the old black box systems.
Well, sure, because they have to read it.
Yeah, they have to spend time reading and evaluating the logic. But over a longer time horizon, those slower analysts develop vastly superior pattern recognition. They catch the edge cases the AI misses, and they maintain the independent judgment necessary to override the system when market conditions just shift unexpectedly.
It also completely shifts the dynamic from a machine dispensing infallible truth to more of a collaborator asking for input.
Yes, very much so.
Like the source material mesh and confidence calibration displays, I thought this was so cool. The AI is programmed to explicitly state its own uncertainty.
Right.
It might flag a recommendation by saying, it has low confidence because the current data falls outside its typical training parameters.
Which intentionally forces human oversight.
Exactly. It wakes the user up and just demands their cognitive engagement.
Microsoft's GitHub Copilot utilized a really similar philosophy in its design, actually. They intentionally positioned the tool as a pair programmer rather than an autonomous coding replacement.
A pair programmer.
Yeah, it suggests code implementations, but the architecture of the interface requires the human developer to actively evaluate the appropriateness of the suggestion, understand the underlying logic, and ensure it integrates smoothly into the broader software architecture.
It doesn't just do it for them.
No. And internal studies revealed that developers using the tool within this scaffolded framework didn't just write code faster, they actually learned new coding techniques and improved their fundamental skills.
Here's where it gets really interesting, I think. It's the difference between hiring a forklift to do all the heavy lifting versus hiring a high-tech personal trainer to spot you so you can lift heavier weights yourself.
Oh, I really like that analogy.
Right. Because the forklift gets the immediate box moved incredibly fast, but your muscles shrink from disuse.
Well,
But the personal trainer helps you move the box safely, and the friction of the process ensures you actually get stronger.
the personal trainer analogy captures the learning science perfectly, actually. Researchers refer to this as scaffolded interaction patterns. The system provides temporary support, the scaffolding, while you are engaging with a difficult problem, but it refuses to do the entire lift for you.
It mandates deliberate practice.
Exactly. And some companies are even formalizing this friction directly into their workflows.
Really? How so?
Well, when Siemens rolled out AI for their engineering design tools, they didn't just distribute the software and tell everyone to work faster. They implemented a parallel learning program.
Okay.
Engineers were required to document novel problems they encountered, detail their strategies for collaborating with the AI, and crucially, document the moments where the AI completely failed or hallucinated.
Oh, wow. So the requirement to document those failures is essentially a brilliant mechanism for forcing active cognitive engagement.
Precisely.
The engineers cannot check out mentally. They have to constantly interrogate the problem and the tool's limitations. They stay present.
Yes.
And I imagine as a secondary benefit, the organization receives highly contextualized feedback to continuously refine the system.
It's a win-win.
But, a personal trainer interface and a failure documentation program will fall completely flat if your manager is just standing over you with a stopwatch demanding maximum daily output.
Oh, for sure.
If the corporate culture demands sheer, unadulterated volume, employees will just bypass the explanation interfaces and use the forklift anyway to hit their quotas. We have to change how companies measure, evaluate, and reward work.
Job redesign is definitely the necessary next step here. The paper outlines this critical concept of task reallocation.
Task reallocation.
Yeah, consider how the Cleveland Clinic approached this. They implemented AI systems that significantly sped up their surgical planning processes. Now, the traditional productivity-obsessed corporate response would have been to look at those 2 saved hours and immediately mandate that surgeons increase their daily case volume.
Right, maximize the surgical output to boost the bottom line.
But they resisted that substitution logic. Instead of forcing surgeons to churn through more procedures, they deliberately reallocated that newly freed time into deeply human, cognitively demanding tasks.
Like what?
They redirected the time into extended, complex patient consultations, thorough surgical team briefings, and dedicated education time for junior surgeons.
That's amazing.
They took the efficiency dividend provided by the AI and reinvested it into the cognitive and empathetic elements of the job. And the result, patient outcomes improved and surgeon satisfaction increased because the core meaning of their work was protected.
That is so powerful. But reallocating time is one thing. If end-of-year performance reviews and bonuses are still tied strictly to how many raw reports you generated or cases you handled, those old behaviors will creep right back.
I always do.
Incentive alignment has to evolve alongside the job description. And Accenture provides a really interesting blueprint here. They introduced AI aptitude as an explicit dimension in their performance review.
Oh, that's smart.
Yeah, they aren't just evaluating the volume of an employee's output, they are evaluating the quality of their interaction with the AI. Like, are they asking sophisticated probing questions? Are they synthesizing the output intelligently?
This raises an important question, though, for management. How do you prevent the measurement of learning or aptitude from becoming just a completely subjective, fuzzy metric?
Right, because it's easy for a manager to count finished reports. But how do they measure someone's AI aptitude without it feeling totally arbitrary?
Organizations make learning visible through structural changes. Things like capability dashboards or skills passports. Instead of a dashboard that only tracks tasks completed, these platforms document the new capabilities an employee has developed or the novel problem-solving approaches they've engineered alongside the AI.
So you literally put learning on the exact same scorecard as productivity, dual metrics.
Exactly.
And you reinforce that with peer recognition. Like, if an analyst figures out a brilliant way to interrogate an AI model to catch a flaw in a financial projection, they showcase that methodology to the wider team.
Yeah, you celebrate it.
It builds social status around thoughtful, critical engagement, rather than just praising whoever generated the highest volume of generic reports.
But none of these metrics will work without foundational psychological safety.
That is so true.
Leaders must actively normalize failure around AI experimentation. If an employee tries a new augmentation strategy to improve a process and it ends up slowing them down for a week, they absolutely cannot be penalized on their performance review.
Because if they are, the entire workforce will just quietly revert to the safe, black box substitution method to protect their jobs.
Precisely. Unilever's approach to their supply chain transformation really highlights how crucial this communication is. They were radically transparent with their workforce. They explicitly stated that the AI was being brought in to make the employees faster and smarter, not to make the workforce smaller.
Wow, that's a big promise.
Yeah, they committed to redeployment over displacement. They established AI ambassador roles to model what effective human-AI collaboration actually looked like on the ground. When you remove the existential threat to someone's livelihood, their willingness to engage deeply and experiment with the technology fundamentally shifts.
That makes total sense. Even with dual metrics and psychological safety, though, organizations still need to cultivate the intrinsic motivation required for employees to put in the intellectual sweat.
Right.
Because you can't just mandate curiosity through a capability dashboard. True cognitive engagement requires autonomy. A pervasive mistake organizations make is concentrating all the AI decision-making power at the executive level and then just handing algorithmic dictates down to the frontline workers to execute.
Leaving the front line with literally nothing to do but push the buttons the algorithm tells them to push.
Exactly.
To prevent that de-skilling, organizations need to build escalation systems based on complexity rather than hierarchy.
Okay, so what does that look like?
It basically means challenging decisions flow to the person best equipped to handle them, regardless of their title. W.L. Gore and Associates, the material science company, operates with this famous flat lattice structure.
I've heard of that.
Yeah, they distribute decision authority incredibly widely across their teams. When they implement AI, they don't use it to channel decisions through endless layers of middle management. They put analytical AI tools directly into the hands of frontline scientists and engineers.
The people who are actually touching the product and understanding the physical materials are the ones empowered to challenge the AI, experiment with its parameters, and ultimately make the call.
Yes.
And that frontline autonomy forces them to keep their own judgment sharp because they remain directly accountable for the outcome.
And keeping that judgment sharp also requires a deep connection to a meaningful mission. When an AI assumes the routine, transactional elements of a role, leadership really has to intensify the focus on the impact of the remaining work.
Like tying it back to the big picture.
Exactly. Patagonia illustrates this beautifully. They implemented AI to tackle massive, complex challenges, things like environmental impact tracking, sustainable material sourcing, and end-to-end supply chain transparency.
So what does this all mean? It sounds like when AI takes away the procedural drudgery, you aren't left with an empty, meaningless job. You're finally left with the actual why of the job.
Yes.
The employees stay intellectually engaged because the technology is empowering them to solve existential, values-aligned problems rather than just optimizing operational costs.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, behavioral research consistently shows that perceived impact, like visibly seeing how your specific work advances a meaningful mission or helps a stakeholder, it predicts motivation far more strongly than compensation or corporate status.
That is wild.
Yeah, if the AI handles the mundane tasks and your organization connects you directly to the tangible impact of the complex work you are doing, your intrinsic motivation to keep learning and pushing boundaries just skyrockets.
This gives us a highly actionable roadmap. So, to summarize for you listening, cognitive polarization, this creeping thread of a mental underclass, is not some inevitable destiny dictated by the march of technology.
Not at all.
It is a deliberate design choice. By demanding tools that augment our thinking rather than substitute it, by redesigning our workflows and incentives to reward learning just as much as raw productivity, and by deeply connecting our daily tasks to the broader why of our jobs, we can protect and even enhance our mental agility.
And your own agency in this transition is paramount. I mean, even if your current organization hasn't perfected this architecture, you can still choose to be the active human in the loop. You can choose to interrogate the AI's logic, to actively seek out the edge cases it might miss, and to deliberately treat these tools as your cognitive personal trainer rather than your forklift. You really don't have to accept the first draft.
You can always choose to push back on the machine.
Which leaves me with one final, perhaps slightly unsettling thought based on the trajectory of this technology. If we successfully build these explanation interfaces, and they eventually become so flawlessly eloquent and perfectly tailored to our individual understanding that we never have to struggle to comprehend their logic, will we eventually need to intentionally program flaws or artificial friction into our AI just to force our critical thinking muscles to keep working?
Wow. Programming artificial friction into our most advanced tools just to keep our brains from going soft. That is a brilliant, provocative thought to leave on. Keep that in mind next time you're sitting at your desk, typing in a prompt and watching that pristine report generate right before your eyes. Ask yourself, who is actually doing the heavy lifting? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious, keep challenging the machine, and we will catch you next time.